Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's media avail following the Emergency Advisory Committee meeting. Mayor Don Iveson will provide an update and then we will take questions from media. First, I'd like to introduce Catherine Owen, Acting City Manager, who will provide some opening remarks.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chris. It sure is nice to see some of our journalist partners here at City Hall. It's been a long time, and we're happy to welcome you back. As Chris mentioned, my name is Catherine Owen, and I'm acting as City Manager today while Andre Corbould is away. Right off the bat, I want to address the fact that the Mayor and I wore a mask up to the podium and then took them off. We understand that even though the province has removed the face covering mandate, some Edmontonians may not be feeling completely comfortable right now. And if Edmontonians want to continue to remain physically distant or wear a face covering in city workspaces or in public, of course they can. That's their choice, and we want to empower them to make that choice. It's vital that Edmontonians continue to be kind and compassionate to those who need more time before feeling safe. Today, City Administration provided an update to Council about our ongoing recovery. We provided an update on how more city recreation programs are returning, pools, recreation programs, and facilities are continuing to open, and their popularity is increasing. Festivals and events are returning with Taste of Edmonton, the Heritage Festival, and now the Fringe. Sports organizations are beginning to energize our community with the Elks returning last weekend and FC Edmonton playing tonight. We also talked about the city's support programs and how we are helping businesses and organizations to move forward. Economic recovery grants have been provided to more than 1,200 businesses, and community agencies in the Orange Hub are also receiving support. More than 40 festival and event organizers have already received supports, and additional funding remains available. And we also talked about transit. Both administration and council are deeply committed to a safe and comfortable experience for transit passengers. We're in the process of finalizing how to do that. The provincial mask mandate remains in place, so until Monday, masks continue to be required on transit. And council will have additional conversations on that day, and we are ready to implement whatever direction they provide. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor Iveson for his remarks, and then, of course, we'll be happy to take your questions.
Well, thanks for filling in, Catherine, and welcome back to members of the media. It's nice to see you in person. We had a thorough briefing at today's Emergency Advisory Committee meeting and had the opportunity to ask lots of questions about the continuing COVID-19 situation here in Edmonton, in our region, and in Alberta. And what is clear is that the city is in a very difficult position, given that the province has signaled that it will be scaling back public health measures and, as a result, limit both the tools and the data that the city has relied upon to respond to COVID. So, for example, our experts clarified that we have no jurisdiction around vaccination passports, and that there remain equity challenges in mandating things like face coverings within a regional context. All that being said, though, there does seem to be some interest on council to consider continuing the masking requirements, at least on our transit system, beyond Monday. And I support looking at maintaining masking on transit to help encourage more people to ride and support safety for students, particularly those too young yet for vaccines, during the pending back-to-school period. Now, our cases, with the data that we still have, show that there is a rising trend, and there is plenty of talk in the world and here about what a fourth wave driven by the Delta variant will look like. And I am hearing lots of concern and from Edmontonians about the data and the trends. And I think we would all like to see the modeling and understand what lies ahead for us here. Because I think it's generally understood that the dominant Delta strain of coronavirus is highly transmissible. And so I'm hearing that concern from our public loud and clear, and I believe members of council are as well. However, and this is in the good column, I was very pleased to hear that we do overall have good vaccine uptake here in Edmonton so far among those eligible, with about 71% of eligible Edmontonians vaccinated with both doses. However, that is still only 60.7% of the total population being fully vaccinated. So those who have their first shot should book their second as soon as they can. That will make a tremendous difference. Many health experts say that the overall number, however, is still not enough to provide herd immunity against the variants and must rise if we are to better contain the virus and defend against the damaging impacts it continues to have on human health and our economy. So it is clear that vaccines are ultimately the solution to ending the effects of COVID-19, or at least managing them into that endemic phase. And we all need to continue to work with community partners to see rates rise in the parts of our city, vaccination rates rise in the parts of our city where they are still lower. There is within the city a fair bit of disparity between different parts of the city, some well over 80% of eligible, some still in the 50s. And so there is still work to do with partners to get vaccines into all parts of the city and the lower socioeconomic areas in particular. And ultimately, when we do have safe and approved vaccines for our younger kids, that will ultimately make a huge difference to everyone's peace of mind, including mine as a dad, for sure. Now, we've all heard the news on vaccine passports that the federal government will be bringing in vaccine passports for international travel. And today, the Chamber of Commerce in both Edmonton and Calgary have called on senior governments to institute vaccine passports for us here as well. Now, the City of Edmonton, again, doesn't have jurisdiction over this, but we do, because we don't even have access to the data that would be required, nor are we asking for it. But I want to echo and agree with the Chamber of Commerce that passports will be particularly important for our tourism and entertainment and hospitality sectors to rebound. And we have so much to show the world, especially down at Fort Edmonton with the reopening and many other great things that we want to kickstart. And so for that sector of our economy and tourism that's been hit so hard in this pandemic, and for our friends in Jasper and Banff and everywhere else around Alberta, we need to sort this out as quickly as possible. Now, I do again hear concerns from our public around children returning to school, and again, personally, as a parent, I support the school boards that are requesting clear authority from the Government of Alberta to mandate masks in schools and require people who are sick with COVID-19 to isolate. So even if council continues masking on public transit, I should clarify that this would not automatically extend to school buses. That would have to be a decision of the school boards. And again, I hope they get the authority to make that decision. And hopefully we can have consistency for getting kids to school safely this fall. Finally, while the public health restrictions have now been lifted, I want to remind everyone and echo what Catherine was saying to be respectful and courteous to those around you. And while you no longer legally have to measure out 2 meters of distance or 1 Don Iveson between you and someone else, it's still polite to assume and not to make assumptions about where people are at. And of course, if someone asks you to stand back or isn't ready to shake hands with you, please be respectful of that. Masks are still very strongly encouraged in all public spaces, and please make assessments for yourself as you determine your own comfort levels. Lastly, the only way forward is, again, for those eligible to get the COVID-19 vaccine to get vaccinated, and again, for those who are not eligible or those who are immunocompromised or children under the age of 12 who are patiently waiting for the results of those clinical trials. The way the rest of us can help them out is putting a ring of immunity around them by getting vaccinated. And that's why I couldn't wait to get both my shots, and encourage those who are still hesitating to put that protection up for each other and for those that aren't eligible yet or can't get it for reasons of immunocompromise. So the vaccine is safe, and I'll end on this, and effective, and having those 2 doses is the best way to support our community's recovery from the challenges and impacts of COVID-19 and to protect ourselves against the variants in particular. So happy to take any questions you might have on this or anything else.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we have Ms. Owen, Ms. Armstrong, and Mayor Don Iveson available to take questions. Each reporter will get one question and a follow-up. We're going to start in the room with Kellen Taniguchi from Post Media. Go ahead, Kellen.
My question is for the mayor. I know in council today, I know provincial road taking place on Monday. You guys discussing on Monday as well. And I know this topic, maybe mixed messaging was kind of brought up there with getting it out to the public. So I guess just to clarify for the public here, I guess should they be prepared for a possible mask mandate on that conversation with them?
My sense from the discussion with council is that there is likely will, maybe not unanimous, but will, including from some councillors who had not supported widespread mask mandate continuation back in June, but who very much understand the value of ensuring and inviting a sense of safety and practical safety, not just a sense of it, on our transit system. And so my sense is that the votes will be there to extend masking requirement on Edmonton transit. Right now, the mandate that's in place applies across Alberta, which means it applies to all of the transit agencies within our region in a seamless and integrated way. Again, that would be our preference because, you know, sort of getting to city limits and putting your mask on or having to put a mask on when you switch from your St. Albert bus transferring to the LRT or to an Edmonton bus. Though there are mixed messages there. This is why we have fairly consistently said this is best done at the metropolitan scale. But if the province doesn't continue to impose that as of Monday, then again, my sense is that the will on council and the votes would be there to maintain a masking requirement for back to school. And we'll have to talk about on what terms it would expire, but by default, if we were to use the bylaw that's sort of mothballed right now, that would only run to the end of year anyway. So it wouldn't be a permanent masking requirement on transit. The default would be subject to council varying it or tethering it to something else would be for the fall essentially until New Year's. But there may be, if we have the right data, there might be a basis to rescind that sooner. If we have vaccination for children, obviously, those are the kinds of things you would tether it to. Those decisions may fall to the next council. But I would strongly support my senses that there will be council support to maintain it.
For that one, I guess just to follow up, I know Transit said that they'd be willing to go with the mandate and whatnot as long as the enforcement is there. So I'm curious if you have an idea of what that enforcement would look like.
Well, I think our overall approach has been light touch and has been to seek compliance as we always do through education. Our transit peace officers were equipped not just with ticket books but with masks, and the first thing to do is to say, hey, would you please wear a mask? And most times people would say, oh, I forgot one and I'm sorry, and put one on and do the pro-social thing. So that's worked well up to this point. I suspect that would continue to be our approach. Again, the overall message is also to give our public confidence that that their health and safety, and particularly the health and safety of their kids who may not be vaccinated yet, is a priority for Edmonton City Council, a priority for Edmonton Transit. I mean, obviously, assuming it passes on Monday. But again, if the province were to extend that provision at their discretion using their stronger tools on a regional basis, that would still be the cleanest solution. So I would certainly call for that. But the fallback would be for Edmonton City Council to send that signal on our own, and then follow up with enforcement as needed if folks are being belligerent. But again, our folks are really good at de-escalating those situations, not escalating them.
Thank you, Kellen. Next, we'll go to our callers joining us virtually. We're going to start with Emily Mertz with Global. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I was just going to ask more about the enforcement piece. What does that look like if the province continues ahead as planned on Monday, and what would the city take in terms of enforcement, I suppose?
Well, again, in the only scenario that's notionally on the table here of transit and perhaps vehicle for hire, and ride sharing, those are areas where we conduct enforcement and are very much within the municipal suite of services that we oversee. So, it wouldn't be any real change in the course of business for us, except instead of enforcing a provincial order, we'd be back to enforcing a bylaw, just like we were before the province brought more widespread mask mandates into place last fall.
And Emily, do you have a follow-up?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next we'll go to Alana Smith, joining us from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Alana.
Hi there. Yeah, my question is for the mayor. I'm just wondering if you've had any conversations with the provincial government just on extending the mask mandate. It seems like that's the direction you'd like them to head.
There have been administrative discussions, I understand, and continuing contact with the government of Alberta. I haven't had occasion to speak politically around this question, and I wanted to have this conversation with council today and understand where council is at. I'll certainly be following up with feedback politically to the government, suggesting that, I think council's prepared to do it, but it would be, again, cleaner if the province did it on a region-wide basis for all the different transit systems that run in and out of and through Edmonton.
Thanks, Alana. Do you have a follow-up?
Sure. I'm just wondering if you think there might be pushback from the province if this entire scenario were to happen on Monday, that you reinstated the mask bylaw locally without the provincial mandate.
You'd have to ask them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alana. Next we'll go to Aaron Singleton from Inside Alberta. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hi there. Thank you very much for taking my question. I know you sort of alluded to this already with respect to the data available to the city with the province going away from the testing that we've seen throughout the pandemic. So if we do see cases start to drop, given that we'll see less data coming in, what would it take for the city to lift the masking bylaw if one would be implemented?
Well, again, I think we'd be we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, because the default would be a time-based expiry is how the bylaw is currently structured. But I think the basis for earlier repeal, the strongest basis would be wider spread vaccination, including youngsters. Whether that will happen by December 31st, I don't know. There's a lot of hope and speculation about the timing of approval for immunization of children. I, for one, hope that that's in that time frame, and that would be the strongest herd immunity enabler that's left in the toolbox for us. And that on that basis, you could say we've achieved notional herd immunity and don't need face covering or other mitigation. So I personally don't think we're there yet. And I'm hearing from a lot of Edmontonians who would like to take a slightly more cautious approach until we can declare victory over COVID. Through that wider spread immunization. As to when exactly we would be able to declare that and feel very comfortable about removing mask requirements on things like public transit, I hope that that's within the coming months. But again, there are factors there well beyond the city's control.
Aaron, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we'll go to Sarah Ryan with Global. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks. I don't know if this is for Carrie or a question. Some stats were put up around surveying Edmontonians or EPS riders about their preference for masks or no masks. And it came out that survey is from June. I think it's fair to say at that point, COVID was a very different, we're in a very different place now. So why not, we've known that this is coming for a while. Why not ask about it again? Why not go back to riders and get a better sense of how they're feeling today about not wearing masks?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Great question. We heard that from council today, and certainly it's something that we can put in our toolbox to further survey riders to determine their level of comfort. We're completely open to doing just that.
But wouldn't that information have been helpful to you guys today?
We've used all kinds of information from across the country and the data that you referenced. So it's not as though what transpired today was done in the absence of research or input from transit specialists. But you make an excellent point, and we're interested in getting even more contemporary data.
Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you. And as a follow-up, if I might go to the mayor. Mayor, we heard today that neither administration, nor you, nor council, nor Dr. Zachary at AHS has seen the science and data driving Alberta Health's changes to our public health measures. What do you think about that? That nobody at the table today has seen that evidence?
I share the frustration that I heard from a number of members of council about the fact that that modeling has not been made public. And to me, I think that vacuum fills itself with a lot of speculation, which is not helping anybody make good decisions, including us. And so I think it would be helpful for that information to be made public, and rather than all the speculation that is left to unfold. I think it is odd that AHS hasn't seen that data and is then still in the awkward position of having to answer questions from folks like us at a meeting today without the benefit of being able to refer to it. So our bias at the City of Edmonton is disclose and share and educate and talk through, and so that would certainly be our default approach in a situation like that, but at the end of the day, those decisions are up to other people.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Sarah. Next up, we'll go to Natasha Reid with CBC.
Hi there, thanks. I think, Katrin, you might be able to explain this a little bit. It's a legal question. When Nancy Jacobson referred to the difficulty of imposing that mask bylaw because the province's health orders will be rescinded. Could you kind of explain how that works? Like, it sounds as though with none of these health orders in place anymore, it's really difficult for the city to take action.
Not being a lawyer, I'll do my absolute best, and perhaps the mayor can layer in his insight as well. Natasha, the point is it's very difficult to have a rule on the books that is hard to enforce. And as the mayor has already alluded to, our approach thus far has always been to encourage Edmontonians, to give them a mask should they need one, to educate and inform, and only then to enforce in the face of obstinance. Without a provincial context that sets a norm, it then requires us to play the part of an outlier in the region.
Provincial public health orders are very strong and unambiguous, and when we also had the enforcement authority delegated to our peace officers to enforce those orders, those were the strongest tools in the toolkit, and again, they were consistent across the region. It's still possible for us to use bylaw powers to impose a mask mandate, as we did previously last year ahead of the province. But the tools are just not as robust. The fines are not as significant. There are a variety of things that are just less impactful and forceful than the tools that the province has at its disposal, but it's still within our authority to do it. And I would argue that on public transit, it's very, very much within our jurisdiction to make rules with respect to the safety of our transit operators and the public.
Okay, so just in terms of Monday and the logistics or the process of council requirements or meetings and rules, is it feasible to actually have a motion put forward or get the city to write the bylaw or reintroduce the bylaw and then pass that on Monday? Is that even possible?
Yes. it should be possible to make a simple text amendment. It would be an amending bylaw, so a bylaw would have to be prepared, but it would be, essentially one or two lines of text that adjust the meaning and applicability of the existing bylaw, which is sitting there dormant, to activate it for transit and any other specific places that council determined it was needed. And so that's fairly straightforward to do. To draft that, is something that our lawyers are very familiar with how to do. So legislatively, I suspect the way it will unfold is that the report that was requisitioned from today's meeting will appear on the agenda. We will likely haul it to the front of the agenda so that we can prioritize dealing with it. A motion can arise there requesting that bylaw or directing that bylaw text amendment be passed, be prepared, and then probably a couple of hours later, with the lawyers being satisfied with the form and content of it, that would then come back to council for consideration. If, assuming there was no objection to passing third reading, all three readings, then that could be dealt with on Monday. If there was an objection to that, the third reading could be considered on Tuesday at the public hearing, I would think. So there's a pathway to get it done, either all on Monday on the same day, or worst case scenario by Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, thanks so much for that.
Thanks, Natasha. Our last reporter of the day is joining us in the room. It's Jeremy Thompson with CTV. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Hi there, and I'm just going to speak this way into the mic so everyone can hear me. Mayor, we have sources at the legislature, of course, and we've had some tips that the provincial COVID committee is meeting right now and potentially discussing extending these health measures at least until Monday and maybe longer than that. I can predict what your answer is going to be on this given everything you've said so far, but is that something that you would be supportive of?
Well, I'm glad the province is continuing to look at this. I imagine they're hearing from a broad swath of the public and the business community about the importance of confidence to continue to reopen the economy and confidence for back to school. And so I imagine that public feedback that we've been hearing too is part of the conversation. And I think it would go a tremendous way to enhance public confidence, particularly about back to school for parents who are quite worried right now, to see some of these measures held over for longer to get us through and help us understand, both in terms of clarity on mitigation measures like masking, and to do that consistently at a province-wide or region-wide basis. That would be very, very helpful. But then also to reassure everyone that we're going to continue to have stronger data for a longer period of time to just see what is actually happening with the Delta variant through back to school. I think that would go a long way to bringing the temperature down and getting us back focused on what do we need to do to get through this together, right? So I would strongly urge the government of Alberta to look at extending some of the measures that are still in place and the testing that's still in place, and some of the rules for transit and rideshare, long-term care, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be very prudent. So they're probably hearing what we're hearing, and I'm not surprised, if your sources are correct, that those kinds of conversations would be happening.
Do you have a follow-up, Jeremy?
We do, yeah. So given what you said about sort of the enforcement on the mask bylaw in the past being sort of education first approach, if there is, do you see a sort of a functional difference on the ground between having a strong recommendation and having an actual mandate, just given the enforcement that is even available given the scale of this?
Yeah, I do think there is a material difference between a request and a rule. Partly, obviously, in what happens with enforcement. You can't enforce a request. But most importantly, the signal of confidence that it gives to riders who are concerned, perhaps if they're immunocompromised, perhaps if they're wondering about putting their kids on public transit to go back to school this fall. Knowing that it's a rule, even though it's a 98 or 99% compliance, you never quite get to 100. But a request is not going to yield 98 to 99% compliance, and that's going to lead to a different sense of confidence for transit riders and parents. And so I do think that there is a material difference in having a rule. And we've seen that, again, by and large and overwhelmingly, Edmontonians have embraced those rules as neighborly things to do to support public health and the economy, and to respect their fellow transit riders and transit operators. So yeah, I do think there's value in having that rule, mainly to give confidence to riders.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I believe that concludes today's Media Avail. I'd like to thank Mayor Don Iveson, Acting City Manager Katrin Owen, Deputy City Manager of Employee Services Kim Armstrong for joining us. Also thank the media for coming out, our interpreters, and everyone else. Thank you. Stay safe and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks,